afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. It is 1 minute past 12 o'clock. Welcome to another webinar from the Chiba Cannabis and Hemp Academy. My name is Trenton Birch, and we're going to be taking you through the next hour and a half through a webinar titled What the Hemp 2.0. We had a hemp webinar a few years ago where it was What the Hemp 1.0. The hemp industry has unfortunately not had the greatest start over the last few years. We had permit issues the first year where they only came out as cultivation was supposed to start. We had seed issues. Then we had seed issues the following year. The irony is that we actually have been trialing seeds in this country for over 20 years, hemp 1 and 2, but those are still not commercially available. We haven't had much money going into training. There's investors who want to put money in, but they're still standing on the sidelines. The THC limit is still sitting at 0.2%. It should be 2%. We've been told it's going to be 2%. Still hasn't happened. And now hemp is banned in food. So there's a lot of industry interest in this particular topic at the moment. And I'm really happy that we've got some amazing guests who are going to come on and talk us through this. I want to make it clear that this is a constructive dialogue. We need to work to get through this and figure out how we can actually create a vibrant hemp industry for our people and population. We do want regulation. I want to make that very clear. We also must ensure that the consumer is protected at all times. We must protect the miners, and we must also make sure that there is proper labeling, safety standards, etc. in place. So we do support all of those narratives. I want to just quickly unpack that there is difference in terms of the approach to this. We have the hemp conversation around hemp being banned in food, which is non-psychoactive, as most of us know. Then we have the THC conversation in edibles, which is psychoactive. And then we have CBD, which kind of sits somewhere in between. I'm very proud to say this is going out live on Cape Town TV, across DSTV, across the continent. It's really important that this is an African conversation, not just a South African conversation. And I just want to give a big shout out to my production team, Linda Saboto and Kavita Pillay, who are behind the scenes working hard to make sure that all of this comes together so that we can discuss and move this industry forward. Right, so I think let's get on to our first set of guests. Unfortunately, the Minister of Health pulled out about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago, due to some other engagement. He had to do something in Parliament. I don't know. But anyway, we've managed to get two people from the Department of Health to come on. So I'm not sure if they're actually on and ready to go. But we have Dr. Unban Pillay and we have Penny Campbell, both from the Ministry of Health, to really unpack why we're in this situation and what has happened. Good afternoon, gentlemen and lady. Welcome. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here. So just you are on mute, so I think you might need to take yourself off mute. But I guess the big question is why the blanket ban? It seems to be a bit of an overreach in terms of this, and what was the reason for that, and what caused that, please?
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation, and good afternoon to the viewers. So what we've done is we prohibited anyone calling what has either a THC or CBD content or even null content to be called a foodstuff, unless there is compliance to our labeling regulations and other hygiene and safety regulations. Only then can it be construed as a foodstuff. So the reason for this is because the SAHPRA, the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, updated the medicine schedules, and it has always been classified that anything with a CBD of less than 0.075 or less would be a Schedule 0 product if it's for ingestion. And only if the Department of Health approves it under the Foodstuffs Act will it then be considered a food. So to just ensure that everyone out there fully understands that when something is not a medicine or a health product, it doesn't mean it becomes a foodstuff. So that was the rationale behind the ban. Not the ban, sorry, the prohibition.
I think I should add that if you look at a number of markets globally around where cannabis is available in food, there is a regulatory system, and I'm very glad that you also mentioned that at the beginning, that there should be some assessment, pre-approval, labeling, etc. I think you've covered kind of all the key areas that are areas that we would like to regulate. So the intention is not to ban them, but to make sure that the contents of those products are acceptable, they're safe, they're protected from children, etc. And so this is a process, obviously, that producers as well as the regulator will go through with suppliers. Yeah.
But you say the intention is not to ban them, but they have been banned. You know, as it stands at the moment, people with hemp products, hemp protein, hemp shakes, hemp seeds, hemp oil is legally now needs to be removed from the shelves. You know, that goes very much against international trends. We do have two international guests coming on later in the webinar just to discuss how big the hemp industry is. Why so overarching? You know, we do understand that products need labeling. We also do understand that when it comes to the THC side, it is complex, and there are complexities to that. But why hemp as well? We just don't understand.
Go first.
Okay, so it depends on how you're marketing your product. If you are complying to the foodstuffs regulations and your product has no THC and no CBD, then there should be no reference on the product to anything such as CBD or THC or even the cannabis plant, because then you are misleading the consumer. And the Foodstuffs Act also covers that the consumer must not be misled by false or inaccurate description of what the product is. So if a product is wanting to be termed a foodstuff, it then needs to be in compliance to our regulations in terms of that.
But you know, we do understand that stuff must be labeled properly, you know, and we also understand that from an industry perspective, you know, there's until there's proper legislation in place, there's a degree of self-regulation that is needed by the industry to ensure that we are protecting people from THC in terms of edibles. We all know that, and that's not a secret. But this ban on hemp just does not make any logical sense. You know, if you look at the hemp farmers at the moment that have about, you know, there's about 1,500 hemp licenses out there. The biggest opportunity for them is to cultivate hemp for food because it's a low-tech application. But essentially what you've done is cut the legs out from those farmers and told them that they can cultivate hemp but completely destroy the market. So I still don't understand the rationale behind this blanket ban. I'd also like to understand how this went about in terms of, from an industry perspective, we have not been consulted on this. There was no dialogue, and it just seems it seems like there's overreach here, and whether that's driven by sort of paranoia or fear, we don't know. But we just really would like to understand the rationale behind why it's been such a blanket ban and why it happened so fast and furiously without anybody knowing about it.
I think it's important to mention that these hemp products and how they are marketed as health products. Hence, we've not banned them and said nobody may sell them. All that we've said is that you cannot call it a foodstuff, meaning that the environmental health practitioners at municipality level that enforce the Foodstuffs Act have not had oversight of these products, whether they've been imported or whether they've been manufactured locally.
But why is hemp not considered a foodstuff? I mean, it is a full protein. You know, it has more protein in it than meat. It is non-psychoactive as long as it's below the THC level. So why is hemp not considered a foodstuff? It's completely illogical.
It can be considered a foodstuff if it complies to the regulations published under the Foodstuffs Act.
Okay, but
so
at the moment
you
have banned foods. You have banned it in food, completely banned it. There's nothing saying that it must be labeled in a particular way. It's just been a blanket ban.
Yes, because the current market of products do not comply with the labeling regulations. And we are still in the process of clarifying the regulatory landscape for hemp. And if we are using hemp, that is the varieties of hemp 1 and 2, which have always been available in this country to be industrialized, they were industrialized for the fiber content that they provide. So whether or not the current hemp seeds provide the nutritional value, we have not seen the evidence as yet. We have had numerous engagements.
You've not seen the evidences yet. I'm sorry, but you are completely contradicting what is happening globally in terms of the value of hemp as a human food, as a protein source. So I'm quite shocked that you would actually say something like that. I mean, I still don't understand the logic behind this. I do understand that things need to be labeled. I know that places like Woolworths, for example, that do stock hemp products have very stringent labeling protocols. But you've just made this blanket ban without considering the different sides of the industry. And for me, what it shows is an ignorance about the actual industry in terms of the different sectors. You've taken this blanket ban called everything cannabis. We know that there are different sectors in the cannabis industry. We do know that there is a challenge with edibles, and that is not what we're arguing about. But to put this blanket ban onto a foodstuff that has been there's research, across the planet that shows what benefits it has to our human beings is just completely counterintuitive to actually looking after our continent and our country's health.
Well, look, I think a number of parties have raised these issues that you're raising now with the minister. So the minister is looking at it, and I'm sure he will come up with a response to the concerns that you've raised and others have raised as well.
Okay. Well, listen, I thank you. I really do appreciate you being on this webinar and your time. It is greatly appreciated. Obviously, this is a big concern for the industry, especially for the hemp farmers, many of whom are in rural areas trying to make a living. And we are hopeful that off the back of this, you can go back to the Minister of Health and implore him and to try and retract this and rework it. We are still waiting for legislation to come through on a government level. So this is not just your department, it's across a number of other departments. But we do really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, guys. Well, there you have it. I must just make it a statement here that it is great that government are coming onto these dialogues and are engaging with us. We've had situations in the past where they've completely refused, so let's give them a nod for that. We also have the DTIC who are coming on, so we're going to bring them on. If we could just introduce our guests, please. So for those of you who don't know, the master plan has been moved from the Department of Agriculture into the DTIC. So that is a good sign in the sense of it means that we are going to industrialize this industry. And it's very important that we have that sort of sector. So I'd like to invite our two guests on, Sina and Timon. There we go. Popping in and out. Ladies, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on. Obviously, what's happened recently has been a bit of a shock to our systems. I wanted to just chat with you about how much the impact this has on the DTI's mandate to industrialize. We as an industry are very happy that the DTI is now sitting with cannabis as part of their mandate. We do feel like this particular ban is going to hinder industrialization, but we'd just like to know what your take on this particular situation is, please.
Thank you so much. I don't know whether my colleagues wants to go in first, but
Yes.
maybe before Sina comes in, you're quite correct that the master plan has been moved to the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Obviously, this shift aims to promote industrialization and commercialization of the cannabis and hemp industry. So the plan, you will be aware that has to involve all social partners that should include government, include industry and labor and all other important stakeholders. So really the shift is to focus on industrializing and commercialization, focusing obviously on different strategic interventions. I'll just mention a few, like your increasing investment, expanding and growing the manufacturing capacity, but obviously also effective regulatory framework has to be on point. So from the department, we really seek to collaborate with all the relevant departments towards developing an all-purpose whole plant legislation for cannabis and hemp, which is quite critical. And from the talks today, you can already see that is important. So yes, we are looking at reviving the master plan process from the DTIC, where all social partners will be involved in creating a master plan and then come up with a plan that will grow the industry. So that's where we are. In terms of the impact of the ban on industrialization and the DTIC, I will hand over to Cinda maybe to take us through that. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you for that input. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tembelihle. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Trenton, for the opportunity. Of course, the ban says that no one should sell, manufacture, import, processed or unprocessed foodstuffs containing, of course, hemp seed oil, hemp seed powder. So it's very specific for food containing cannabis powders and oils. So as the DTIC, the impact that we will see, because at the moment it's a new ban. So of course companies will, those that are using cannabis to make foodstuffs will cease production. That those production lines will obviously have to stop, because a ban is a regulating tool of government. So people that are doing anything against it, there are of course implications. So companies need to comply, but with the hope that soon the Department of Health, as our colleagues have spoken now, they should look at developing regulations that will guide how cannabis or hemp should be used, in food production, including how to label appropriately. And on the markets, we also see imported food products. So the regulations has to be very specific on how, especially imported products and locally manufactured food products, should be labeled so that consumers are aware. At the end of the day, as government and also producers, we need to think about consumer safety and health. So we will also work very closely with them, because the Department of Health are also part of one of the working stream in the cannabis master plan. So as government, as the DTIC, we will work very closely with them. And in terms of incentives, as soon as the ban maybe is lifted and regulations are in place, of course, companies that produce cannabis food containing cannabis can start applying for funding from the DTIC. And education is also critical. Consumers need to be taught, awareness should be raised. And I think the Department of Health should come up with a program to educate consumers on how to look at, read the labeling, so that whatever that they buy, it comes from an informed decision, because consumers always want to know what they consume. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sina. I mean, we do agree that labeling must be done properly. We also agree from an industry perspective when it comes to edibles, they are often not labeled correctly. So we need to also self-regulate in the gray zone that we have at the moment. Just the last question, just how is the master plan going? Obviously, it's been pushed from pillar to post for a number of years now. Where are you guys tracking with that?
Thank you so much, Cinda, and thanks, colleagues. Yes, with the move of the master plan to the DTIC, I think I had indicated that we are obviously reviving the master plan process, where we want to get all social partners involved in co-creating the master plan, because you will understand or remember that a master plan is not a government document, but it requires co-creation from all social partners that are relevant for the master plan. So we're looking at reviving that process. And obviously, once approved, the master plan, and then we will then work with business, with industry and the farmers, obviously, ensuring that they are able to produce cannabis and hemp products that will go obviously to our local and export markets. You will remember that our minister now is going to chair the IMC for cannabis, which becomes important, because we do need that agreement also at the political level, where ministers sit and see whether there is any move in this sector. And where there are things that need to be unblocked, then they unblock, so that then the sector can function. We will be reconvening also the governance structures for the master plan, including intergovernmental committees sitting and dealing with what they have to deal within the government, and coming to business also to work closely with them and co-create the master plan. I think that's where we are now, and you should be on the lookout. We are going to be reaching out to industry partners to work with us in developing this master plan for this important industry, because we do believe it's an important industry, especially for our local, farmers, and especially those that have been in this industry from time immemorial. So we have to make sure that the sector works for them. They are able to profit also from the sector that they've suffered for years. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. I cannot emphasize the importance of this. The Pakisa happened going on almost 2 years ago. And we all know, well, most of us know what Pakisa means. It's hurry up in Sesotho.
Yeah.
We really asked the DTI to please Pakisa. Last year on a DTI meeting, we were told that the legislation would be on the table by the end of the financial year. Just quickly, are we still on track for that, or are there delays?
We are on track with that. We are developing the cannabis and hemp commercialization policy. I think there's been a lot of engagements internally within government on that, and also we've brought in our DFIs, because Sina speaks about incentives, but the incentive that the DTIC gives, it might not cover everything. Let's say a company comes and they want to put up a factory to produce food that is infused with cannabis. Hopefully the bans and the regulations are sorted, and then we are able to then support from the DTIC, but we need the IDC, we need others, DFIs also, and banks to come in and sort of like take the other part that the DTIC can't cover. So it's very important for us then to finalize the commercialization policy and talking to all the relevant departments, our DFIs, our COTI, those institutions that will then regulate some of the work, including your SABS, your NRCS. So we are hard at work in pushing that the commercialization policy obviously goes for external consultations, which is going to be very soon. I know internally there is a process of moving the policy through the internal processes to approve before we go out for consultations. So we might not be making Pakisa a fast progress, but we are making progress in making sure that the policy is out.
We must, Pakisa, we must.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and you coming on. It's really important to get the narrative into the industry. We are on your side. We are behind you. Anything we do to support you. We'll carry on our little boxing match with the Department of Health. But for us, we're friends, and we want this industry online for our people and to generate revenue, etc. So thank you, ladies, for coming on. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. We are looking forward to working with the industry in growing the sector, and we appreciate being invited to this webinar, and hopefully we can come back and report faster progress in the near future. Thank you so much for inviting us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Great, guys. Well, there you heard it. There is progress. I think it's a massive step forward to move this to the DTIC. Industrialization is key. It's a sunrise industry, but we need to move this thing forward so that we have the competitive advantage globally, etc., etc. We all know those things. Right, I'm going to bring on our next two guests, Ayanda Bam and Ricky Stone, stalwarts in the industry, been at this for a long time, trying to unpack what's going on. And I really want to just unpack sort of the discussion that's happened, some of the points that we made to get an understanding of, is the wool being pulled over our eyes from the Minister of Health and the Health Department? The DTI, very encouraging in terms of what they said. But Ayanda, maybe you could just give your comments on what you've heard.
Thank you very much, Trenton, and thank you to you and the Chiba team for putting this together. Where does one actually begin here? I mean, I'm a little bit appalled, frankly, by actually the presentations that have been made, both by the Department of Health and the DTIC. The one thing, let me deal with the DTIC first, and then we'll get to the Department of Health and this Gazette. The DTIC come onto this platform and would have us believe that there is absolutely no history, that in effect, we've only just started this work around the master plan or cannabis and hemp sector very recently. I mean, it's the most ahistorical thing. They're always talking about things in the future. We are going to put together a commercialization policy. The contents are completely opaque. There has been absolutely no engagement with anybody else, as they've confirmed. They've had internal discussions about a commercialization policy. Let me remind folks that that is the same hymn sheet that was used in 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, 23, 24. It's March 18th today in 2025. We're still hearing about this commercialization policy that somehow exists in the ether, but we've never had an opportunity to be able to engage with it. There is no commercialization policy. There is no economic or industrial strategy. There is no plan. So this idea that we are moving ahead and whatnot, they're really, these guys are really trying us. And I'm so sorry I hate to be disrespectful here, but I think to express some of the anger, both from industry and civil society, at the fact that we are not just starting the master plan process now, and we've attempted for years to engage with these folks. The issue here is government, and the other thing, other than the sort of ahistorical kind of response, is also like this deliberate conflation about all sorts of things. We can get to the substance of that, but I think it's a reflection above everything else about the lack of coordination within government. You see, we have the displeasure of dealing with a sector where we have to deal with, like, I don't know, Ricky can confirm 13 different acts that sit across 8 different departments. So when we're talking about the capacity and capabilities of government and their inability to coordinate, in other sectors, it's even worse in our case, just given the breadth that's being covered. So it's really challenging to understand all of this, and this conflation around cannabinoid containing foods or edibles versus like hemp foods, which are foods. This is grain with naturally occurring trace elements of THC and CBD. They're not additives. It's not like somebody's taking and extracting CBD and then putting it into hemp flour. This is a complete conflation. What they're talking about from the Department of Health and what is in the Gazette are not the same things. They're now backtracking and talking about labeling and whatnot. This is complete nonsense, and it's a complete obfuscation from the fact that they've made a major blunder that has consequences beyond the cannabis industry, because these are products that have been traded for decades in South Africa legally without any challenges. And now we're affecting folks like the Woolworths, ShopRite, Dis-Chem, Faithful to Nature, and we're talking tens of millions in terms of damages from this. It's wholly unjustifiable. And the fact that they've circumvented the process of public consultation by saying that this is something that's really urgent, I mean, is extraordinary to us, because if it was so urgent, why do you sign this thing on the 16th of January, but only gazetted on the 7th of March, which is more than enough time, right, to be able to run a public consultation process, which I think is a minimum of 2 weeks or something like that. So there is no urgency. They've not been able to determine what that is. This is an obfuscation, and it is a reflection of the prohibitionist issues that we deal with still in all sorts of departments, including chiefly in the Department of Health. But I think Ricky can give a legal perspective on that. But I'll very simply say to the average South African citizen who's listening here, what the departments have actually said is absolute nonsense. We can extract some bits and have reasonable discussions about cannabinoid containing foods, but this is not their jurisdiction as the Department of Health. And there is a process for consulting. Why have you not consulted even with your own partners? It's a complete blunder.
Thanks for that, Anda. I was going to say in the beginning, but I thought I'd leave it to later. One of the things we need to remember as an industry is we're at war. Big pharma, big food, big alcohol, big meat, big plastic, big cancer. This is a big disaster in terms of, especially when it comes to the hemp side. So, Ricky, over to you. Let's get your thoughts, please.
Good afternoon, Trenton. Great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, and greetings to your viewers. Perhaps it would be appropriate of me just to make very clear, I think many know that I play various roles in the cannabis sector, including advising government. So, of course, I'm not here to be a mouthpiece for government. and am joining as a human being that just so happens to be an attorney specializing in environmental and earth medicines law. That, of course, doesn't mean that, although my words are usually measured, that I would hold anything back. So, look, I think if anything, I can only appropriately call them in respect of the 2 radio interviews yesterday on Cape Talk and Metro FM, which I'm calling the reasons via radio, and these reasons via webinar today, really cut right through everything. And what it reveals to me is the ignorance in respect of this crop, which I think, is so cross-cutting and ultimately reveals why we are in this position, which, I always try to look for silver linings in anything. And I see, even though this ban, we must call it what it is a ban, really does provide that opportunity now for some political leadership to step in, take control of this situation, put in place a time-bound program of action, and really, with all due respect, avoid further embarrassing situations. I don't think we can discount that this has been utterly embarrassing for South Africa as a country, embarrassing for our government, considering other responses at high-level offices and different departments to the Department of Health. So, to Ayanda's point, the minister has purported to rely on Regulation 15.7 when making, or Section 15.7 rather, of the Foodstuffs Act when making these regulations. However, as Ayanda noted, it was signed on the 17th of January, but only gazetted on the 7th of March. Now, Section 15.7 is, of course, important because it does allow what is actually a 3-month or 90-day public participation process. And that's not only consulting with the public, that's also intended to consult intra-governmentally, right? That's a very important aspect here, that other government departments were also not consulted in respect of these regulations. Now, we always say in law, like, the document speaks for itself. So the long period of time between 17 January and 7 March, almost 2 months, could never justifiably meet the requirements of that section, which says that the minister has this power to make regulations without consulting anybody if it's in the public interest and if consulting would delay things. So, absolutely reveals sheer ignorance. And I think, these reasons via radio and reasons via media have illustrated that. There's lots of confusion around what an actual foodstuff is, a food, per the definition of the Foodstuffs Act. And, the starting point for anybody reading legislation really should always be the definition section, which is always the first section in any act. And a foodstuff is defined there. Now, it's defined and anybody that struggled to find this act is forgiven, because it's quite difficult to find an updated version. Of course, this law is 50 years old, which itself should speak volumes, has never really been revised since then. Arguably, is it even fit for purpose for a food industry, broadly speaking, in 2025? I would say it absolutely is not. But now, in the definition, it's clear that a food is a substance that's ordinarily eaten or drunk by a human. Okay, but there's an exception, and the exception is that what isn't a food is a substance that's regulated by the Medicines and Related Substances Act. So because CBD and THC are regulated under the Medicines Act, this regulation wasn't even necessary, because cannabis derived products, I'm not going to call them foods because they aren't foods, they're a separate category, already regulated by the Medicines Act. So again, this just illustrates the ignorance within the Department of Health, and I do say that with respect.
Completely. Thank you, guys. We've got to keep the pace. We really appreciate your input. Thanks for your time. Yeah, I mean, just to show you the sort of irony of all this is like this is completely legal in our country. This piece of food, okay, it's a double donut with a piece of industrial chicken in the middle, so that's acceptable. Also, if you look at the actual the fast food industry and just the sort of toxicity that our people have to go through, you know, in the Indigo Wellness Index in 2019, we were ranked as the most unhealthy country in the world. Obesity, blood pressure, etc., etc. So, you know, we're not, you know, the minute these health departments turn around and say they're protecting our people, is actually a lie. I mean, if you look at the FDA in the States at the moment and how that's being taken to task, the fact that there's one organization that represents food, which is making people sick, and then represents the drugs that makes them better, is just one of the most farcical things that in our time. I think it's also important to understand, just bringing into our next guest, that the opportunity for global hemp-based foods is absolutely huge. You know, 5.4 billion last year, and it's projected to go to 10.6 billion in 2023. Massive growth opportunity, but we must remember wherever there's a growth opportunity, there's also a threat to different industries like the meat industry, the poultry industry, and other industries, the alcohol industry that will take a knock. So I'm really pleased to get our next two guests on who have a lot of experience in the hemp food space. We have Clara from Sweden and Paul from Australia, and they are joining us live from those two territories. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here. Just give us a little bit of insight into the size of this industry globally and how things are moving in your territories. Paul, we can start with you, please.
Sure. Thank you, Trenton, and g'day, South Africa. I started in the hemp foods industry nearly 30 years ago and created that in existence in UK because I had heard that hemp foods had been used for thousands of years. So I created some hemp food products that quickly turned into products that sold over 300 million types of snack bars and then became an industry itself in the UK and throughout Europe. I came to Australia in 2000 where hemp foods wasn't legal here, and I thought that would be an easy way, and hopefully this makes you guys feel a little bit better, but it took me 17 years to legalize hemp foods here in Australia, which is a ridiculous story. So hopefully it doesn't take you 17 weeks, let alone 17 years to make these changes back to how they should be. And obviously now I get to hold my hemp seeds. Sorry, this is illegal where you are now. And, you know, I can have tea, I can have chocolate, I can have cakes, I can have protein. And these aren't adverts because I just advise companies now. I don't work in any of those things. But the point being is that, you know, there's hundreds of tons of materials being used, thousands of hectares being grown for these products, making millions of dollars and giving lots of jobs for people on the ground. And it's very simple. These foods don't get you high, don't contain any THC, but contain amazing quality of protein and essential fatty acids. And these are the reasons why these foods are great for you, because they are the opposite to the picture you showed of that chicken donut, I guess, which is literally the cause of the pharmaceutical industry, which basically, you know, has to give you drugs which cause more problems to create more problems. And when you can just eat natural foods that grow in a farm from this product and this plant that has all these different commercial uses. So I'm really excited to see these changes and supporting South African industry. And I think these mistakes, and I will call them mistakes, that the Ministry of Health have done by banning all hemp foods and specifically calling out hemp foods will be reversed because common sense generally does prevail. And as I said, I hope that takes less than 17 years.
Yeah, well, common sense doesn't often prevail here, sadly. Just quickly, you were recently in South Africa, obviously meeting some people in the space. I had the pleasure of meeting you. What is your lens on South Africa's opportunity in terms of hemp?
Well, I think in general, South Africa has one of the best opportunities in the world. And I love that South Africa is very much independent from America and doesn't listen to what these crazy people say too much, doesn't listen to too much about what happens in Europe, doesn't listen to too much about anywhere in the rest of the world, takes the best of these places to make the best of what they can. So the benefit of actually being last to market, we'll say, as a continent, really is an opportunity to do this really well by growing hemp sustainably. And I see the people within South Africa all have the skills. You have some really awesome people there, really great industries, and I really hope to support anyone in South Africa willing to commercialize these opportunities to look after all Africans locally without following anyone's regulations. Yeah, sure, you need regulation in terms of labeling laws and these kind of things that I heard the Ministry of Health state, but these are very obvious and very simple things that can be solved within 5 minutes if they want to listen.
Absolutely. Paul, really appreciate you being on. Thank you. Clara, you've obviously spent time living in South Africa. You run a hemp food company in Sweden. What's your take on firstly the global industry in terms of how it's moving forward with hemp food and the legislation that's being put in place at the moment?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, Molweni, to everybody in South Africa. I'm very, very honored to be here and very good that we are doing this, or we are doing this together. And also thank you to all the previous speakers. So before I start the talk, I want to make sure that my sound is good. You hear me good?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. I want to start with saying, because you're talking about the big pharma or big war and these things, I see it as we have a big opportunity here to collaborate, to join forces. And we can join forces with the meat industry and the soy industry and so forth, because this is a food ingredient that can replace or phase out or complement different kinds of food. And if we look at in a global perspective, as you were asking, and also referring to Paul talking about not listening to the Americans, they are actually working very hard at the National Hemp Association there, and Mr. Jeff Whaling is very persistent on pushing this on a global scale, and also with the UN Habitat and the World Health Organization and so on. And they are pushing the industry also in America to be able to use hemp seeds for food. In my perspective in Sweden, where I live currently, I've been living on and off in South Africa since 2003 and learned about hemp in South Africa. So in our perspective in Sweden, it's actually not banned. Here we have a ban around the flowers and the buds, but not on the seeds. And that is because, as Paul was also saying, there is no THC and CBD in the seeds. They are in the leaves and the buds, and they have to die or rotten, not rotten, but they have to become over mature, then the seeds are coming. And then that's what we are eating, like in any other crop, cereal, wheat, rye, and so on. So this is a great opportunity for farmers to diversify their plantation planning, for the industries to diversify and have more access to protein, omega-3, all essential amino acids, and so forth. And in terms of
things that are urgently needed in developing economies, especially.
Excuse me?
Things that are definitely needed in the emerging economies.
Yes, because this is job creation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Clara, we're going to have to call it there. Jeff Whaling actually messaged me this morning and said that he's busy helping 12 African countries come online with hemp. So, you know, while the continent moves forward, we just move backwards. So it completely makes no sense. Guys, thank you so much for your... I
just want to finish with that. I think it's very important that when we talk, we separate the cannabis from the industrial hemp, because it's two different things, even if it's the Latin name. But we have to separate and look at hemp as a crop, same as wheat and rye and so forth. So that's important. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your input. Thank you, guys. Have a beautiful day. Right, on to the next. So there's been quite a lot of stuff that's actually been done in South Africa to develop hemp food products that has actually been funded by government, ironically. So our next guests are going to unpack that. We have Kian coming on, Kylie, and David. So if you could please join us. Hi guys, thank you for your time and coming on today. So let's just quickly unpack some of the stuff you've been doing with the CSIR. Kian, I know you've been in that for a long time. Let's start with you and then we'll move down the list.
Excellent, Trenton. Thank you for having us on and this very important discussion. So we got a research and development permit from the Department of Health through the CDC in 2019. And then we formed a partnership with the CSIR to research hemp for medicinal purposes, but also very importantly for nutritional purposes for humans and for animals. That research partnership has been going since then. And ironically, that started when you said South Africa was declared as the most unhealthy country in the world, which is quite ironical. And then for the last 2.5 years, we've been developing a specific human superfood and an animal superfood. The human superfood is based on a Tswana and Venda dish called ting, so it's culturally appropriate. And according to the CSIR, it is one of the most nutritional superfoods that they have ever seen. So we have documented proof from the CSIR of a very, very, very beneficial superfood that treats both malnutrition and obesity. The objective of this product was to get it into school feeding programs around the country, because as you know, we have this problem where school kids are not getting sufficient nutrition. So the project was actually funded by the CSIR and the Gauteng Department of Agriculture, which is even more ironic that this ban has come from government. So there is documented proof by the CSIR and also other international institutions that verified a lot of the data that this is a bona fide superfood. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting. Kylie, you've been in this program with the CSIR for some time now as a small business, which has been amazing to see how government has actually supported small business. What are your thoughts on this ban, and where does that leave you? Especially, I know you do a lot of cosmetic stuff. You just need to unmute yourself. Can't seem to get Kylie. Kylie, maybe you just want to log back in and out, and I'll go over to Prof. David. Prof. David, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Great to see you again. I know you're in the thick of all of these this research and development. How has this made you feel?
Well, look, I have a kind of contrarian view, but it's come through, right? So I think on the one hand, we need to separate cannabis, marijuana, or in this country, what we would call medical cannabis, from the hemp space. And I don't think we are doing enough of a good job to do that. And you could see the confusion filtering through from our colleagues at DOH, because they kept talking about cannabis. Whereas I think we really need for them to talk about hemp and industrial hemp, which is a food crop, right? And that's why we generally would not grow hemp for the flower, but we grow it for the seed. And as you know, all our diets are really seeds. You know, when Kian is talking about ting, that is sorghum. You know, so in fact, the human and animal nutrition is seed, right? And so when you look at hemp seed, there's no difference between hemp seed and sunflower seed, right? Because these things have oils, they have carbohydrates, and they have residual, very, very small amounts of cannabinoids. And that's a message that should be going out there. So this ban should be more nuanced. They should really be looking at, we are going to say those products that have THC and we agree on a level, or have CBD and we agree on a level, should be the ones that are regulated. And you said it right at the beginning, that we are not anti-regulation. And then things like hemp seed oil, hemp seed flour, those are really foods, right? And we don't, as I say, we regulate foods differently in other ways. We regulate them at point of manufacture, right? Rather than we looking at the chemistry of foods, we don't do that. And so with us, we are also then, as you said, in the research space, and we have the requisite permits to extract both hemp oil, and in most cases, our clients are bringing us the flower, the floss oil, and then the high THC oil. And maybe we should move away from this. Maybe we should say low THC, high THC. I don't know, but there's a lot of confusion, and maybe that's where we are here. And the DTI colleagues were talking about education. Yeah, we definitely need education. With what's happening, the economy, what's happening globally, I think actually we need all sources of good protein. Protein malnutrition is one of the biggest problems we deal with across the African continent. Soya beans is not very good for the environment, but we know that hemp is. So I think we really need to advocate for hemp as a food source. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that input. I mean, the complexity in South Africa is also that we have land race. There are a lot of developing countries that have no such thing as land race. And should we even be calling it hemp or cannabis, or should we be calling it cannabis? And if it's medical, responsible adult use, and then industrial, that might sort of quell the confusion. Those are things that need to be sorted out. The point is, though, is that we've had enough time to deal with this, and things are just taking way too long. Kylie, this has a direct impact on your business. How do you feel about this ban?
I personally feel it's two steps forward, one step back. For the past 5 years, I threw myself at the deep end to actually understand how the cannabis legislation works, and also how I can also kind of start a business and be lawful at the same time. I was fortunate enough to actually be selected to work with CSIR as well as TIA, which is a sister of DSI. And I'm a product of actually what is possible out there with guidance and mentorship, and kind of using the existing knowledge that's out there. People can benefit, but this blatant ban, it actually stops people from actually making an impact in terms of job creation, unemployment. I feel like it's actually unconstitutional because in 2018 they ruled that cannabis in general, dacha, would be legal to be it's legal to use in your private use, but the way the law is going now, it's we actually going backwards. So I'm asking the department kindly to review this bill, or the act, or whatever they've decided, and to reverse it, because it actually impacts thousands of businesses. And also I feel like in a time now where South Africa is in need of that economic opportunity, cannabis can also be used for that. And then also I feel like we're not actually thinking about the indigenous communities as well. What about the people that have been growing cannabis for thousands of years? Do we ever think about them when we make these laws? Because as it is, they are left out. They've been marginalized already in the cannabis industry due to poverty, and like they're being also arrested unnecessarily. So I'm asking kindly for this ban to be reviewed and to be reversed, because it does affect me as a small business as well.
Great, thanks for that, Kylie. I think the general word is that we want this reversed. We don't want middle grounds. We don't want a little bit of this or a little bit of that. We want this completely reversed. It was done unconstitutionally. It was done without industry input, and it makes no logical sense. And as some of our earlier guests have said, it makes it look ridiculous and stupid to the international market, and that we just don't know what we're doing. So I completely agree. Guys, thank you so much for that input. We're going to move on to the next group. The next people coming in, we're bringing in Tami, from the Eastern Cape region, as well as Dr. Galada. Dr. Galada runs the Township Cannabis Incubator in Mthatha, and they do a lot of product development and working on trying to empower farmers. And then Tami is the secretary of the Eastern Cape Hemp Association. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. You guys are on the ground at the coalface of farmers that have been manipulated, lied to, arrested, sprayed, you name it. So how do you feel about this legislation that's just sort of come out of nowhere? Tami, maybe we'll start with you. I know you've been at this a long time.
Thank you, Trenton, for having me. Thank you, Shiba, for affording us this platform. When we looked at the ban, we said first it is fake news, but we learned to find out it is not. and we looked at what is doing to us. We said it is like something that is very much painful to a human being to miscarry an unborn child. That's what this is. And we find when I'm listening to the health department people that were here talking, I found out they haven't done any sort of a research or understand what is this industry all about. They were just doing it for the sake of doing it without looking at the impacts of it to the people that are on the ground. When we have to talk about the people that belong to the Eastern Cape hemp producers, who had farmers that were pioneers of the hemp research, you'll understand them feeling that the way that they feel, because it has been more than 20 years this going on research and legislation being changed to be favorable. Sometimes when this legislation is not actually favorable to anybody. It is just a legislation that needs also us to work around it. And then when we're starting to say things are going to come and be okay for us, especially when you are listening to the developments that are being done by the master plan, where they've changed the years of the permit, they've changed, they are trying to change the THC limit on the hemp product. You think that something is going to happen. Then whilst you're looking at that, boom, there comes the minister and ban the whole thing. And
they got that over the line very quickly. It didn't take them long to do that, but it takes them forever to do everything else. Absolutely.
Yeah, yes, and nobody can emphasize the health benefits. In fact, what I'm always saying, I'm saying when I'm talking hemp, I'm talking of a plant that has got the fundamental human needs that you can align with the Maslow's human needs, where you clothe yourself, you heal yourself, you have a shelter. It covers everything that we have. When you are in the rural areas, you don't have a doctor, close by clinic, a medical aid. Sometimes you don't have transport. You look at the natural plants that are around you that can help you in whatever that is there at that time. That's when some of us learned to use the cannabis plant, not because we wanted to sell it to the smokers. If the department wanted to protect the people of South Africa, the very first thing they should have done is to ban liquor. There's no nutrients or anything that you get from liquor. That one totally. So to me, they do not have a reason to say they have to ban the plant. They are killing the mushrooming businesses that we have done, that we are trying to have in the Eastern Cape. The most poor, the most province that has got unemployed graduates. I'm not talking about the unemployed youth. I'm just talking of unemployed graduates, that some of them were starting to say, yes, we are going to join in, whether being farmers or SMMEs. They have cut and shut down all the dreams of those people. When you're looking at that, you are seeing a situation where we're saying, yes, there comes Medigrow, things are going to happen. 1,000 hectares were spared to make sure that you are going to feed that plant that is promising to give 1 billion in the next 5 years. Abruptly, the minister decided to put a ban. And what makes us to hurt more is that the ban came without it being announced. It was just gazetted. There were no green paper, no white paper. There were no consultations, which we think that they are very much important and fundamental to what you are doing. If there is any reason that makes them to ban the plant, I think it is something that has to come somewhere. But for now, they do not have any reason except their own way of sabotaging what is happening, of making sure that the hunger, the poverty, and recently there are traces of malnutrition that are coming in our province, which were going to be taken away by this plant. All of the problems that the government is facing now are easily taken off by allowing them to make sure that the hemp plant goes there, because it is out of the cannabis plants, it has more of the low-hanging fruits that can benefit the people. So I can't find a reason for them to say, okay, let's ban it. And no, there's no reason. They must just put it back And we demand that. And we also demand that the minister and with his crew, they must come to the Eastern Cape and do a door-to-door, as they do when they are canvassing for elections, door-to-door, trying to talk to the people that are affected by legislation. And we'll give ourselves time to educate them more, because you can see there's a lot of ignorance that is happening. They don't know what is DACA and they don't know what is Hemp. They are mixing them.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Sorry, we're running out of time, and I know you're deeply passionate about this. So sorry that I'm interrupting you, because I know you have such insight and value to the conversation. Dr. Galada, you're in Tata, just outside the Township Cannabis Incubator. There's also been government funding to build a processing center there, where you're helping to develop SMMEs and foodstuffs as part of that. How has this affected the community that you're in and your project? You're on mute. We've lost Doc. Cool. It looks like we've lost the Doc. We'll see if we can get her back in, but I think let's move on to our next guests. So, right, are we there? Still there? Still live and kicking. Our next guests are, who are they? Tebogo and Myrtle Clark. Myrtle is actually overseas at the moment, doing all kinds of wonderful work to drive the cannabis agenda forward. Tebogo involved with the Cannabis Trade Association and also from Biomuti. Guys, how's it? Thanks so much for being here. Myrtle, thanks for dialing in from, I don't know if you're in Spain or Vienna anymore, gallivanting around. So very keen to hear some input from you in terms of how this has been received overseas. Tebogo, I want to start with you. You've been in this industry a long time, sort of stalwart of the space, and I know we've been pushing this massive rock up this massive hill for a long time. You're a small business. These kind of things impact small businesses. How do you feel, from a business perspective and also from a trade body perspective, that this is going to impact our situation? So over to you.
Trenton, I don't know if you can hear me. I don't have power at my house, so I had to come to a restaurant to come and make this happen. It's such an important topic that we're talking about. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. Look, I think, I didn't hear your question, but I'll just jump in based on the initial interview that you had, and I say hi to your viewers coming out of CTAA, is that we feel that, or at least what comes across from the Department of Health, is just lies and nonsense and just complete disregard of what we are doing on the ground. And I think the amount of work that we've been doing to put all this thing together is literally just being thrown out in the toilet, which is quite unfortunate, at this juncture. And I think, when you're looking at, all the answers that are coming back from the Department of Health, even the radio interviews that we've listened to, the explanation of saying that we are doing this so that we can come up with a proper labeling. It's also another BS, if I may call it that, because if you want to come up with a labeling and some sort of a direction, you then want to talk to the people that are in the industry and say, guys, what can we do here? These are the challenges. But we didn't hear that. We had a unilateral decision made by a 1972 law, which is in itself an outdated law that's trying to govern modern food. I mean, modern food, we're not talking about cows and sheep anymore. We're talking about really proper, clean protein that we so need in this country, that we so need in these schools, that we so need in this highly malnutritious state of our country and in various different places. So I think the Department of Health is concentrating on wrong things. As Tammy had said, we have a huge alcohol problem in this country, and this is where they should really put their effort in banning all these many liquor stores that are popping up everywhere and stuff like that. I think that will be a great job that the Department of Health will be doing, but not limiting and stopping what we have as what we know about the nutritional values of hemp. And I think I'll just hand it over to Myrtle. I'm sure she's burning to say a few things.
Thanks, Tebogo. Myrtle, thanks for joining us. Where are you at the moment?
Hello. Hi, everybody. I just want to say thank you, Trent and Linda, the amazing Chiba team, for putting this on. We are in Amsterdam. We've just landed about an hour ago, so we rushed to the hotel. We're sitting in the hotel dining room. We've had an amazing little whiz around Europe. The main reason why we came here was to go to the United Nations in Vienna. We arrived at the Vienna International Center on Monday morning to the news that that all of these foods containing cannabis had been banned in South Africa. And certainly the first thing that I felt was intense embarrassment. Embarrassment with my colleagues from around the world that I've been working with for 15 years on an international level. When I broke this news to them, it was just like, I don't even know where to start. I wanted to just hang my head in shame. We've spent the last 6 months preparing for our meetings at the UN and also for our little exhibition. Now, this was quite a breakthrough. We were accepted to have an exhibition about the centenary of cannabis in Vienna. We had to jump through lots of hoops. They didn't really want us there, but we eventually, common sense prevailed and they allowed us to exhibit. And on our stall was hemp bricks, hemp rope, hemp seed, hemp flour, hemp fabric, hemp shoes. We brought a whole truckload of stuff from the Czech Republic where they produce a lot of hemp. And we put that in our little booth and we juxtaposed it with Prohibition and the harms of Prohibition. And one of our center point posters was the harms of Prohibition far outweigh the perceived harms of the plant. And this is where the embarrassment comes in, really, is because what century are we living in that the Department of Health has obviously been having some words in between them, certainly not with any of us, and they've jumped straight into a ban. That is their answer. When all of those children died at that tavern in the Eastern Cape, did they jump in and ban alcohol? No, they didn't. But we've discussed that already this morning. And to just resort to prohibition instead of dialogue and solutions is embarrassing and it's ignorant. We have been around 15 years myself, all my colleagues from Fields of Green that are busy watching, my colleagues from Sachida. We've all been doing this for a long time. We have offered ourselves up. We have offered our experts from the industry, in both international and local, to go and sit down human being to human being and speak to these government officials and educate them. So I feel somewhat insulted when a government official has to say to me, we need more education. No, we do not need any more education. They need the education. So our exhibition in Vienna was a
I'm going to have to stop you there because we need to go to an ad break because we're actually on live TV. So apologies for that, but we're going to an ad break. We'll come back to you quickly and then see if we can get the doc on, and then we'll go on to the next section. But we're back in a few seconds. Thanks. And we're back, just to prove we are on live TV across Cape Town TV, all the way across DSTV, across the continent. Thanks for staying with us. We've only got a few minutes left. I'm going to just bring the doc on because we lost her earlier. Thanks to Myrtle for tuning in from Amsterdam. Very jealous, great city. No, thanks to DeBorkel for your insight. Really appreciate it. Doc, we were talking earlier on about how the TCI is developing sort of programs for SMMEs, especially with product development. How has the community taken this news, your side?
Thank you, Trenton. I believe you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you clear.
Thank you. We're very disappointed, Trenton, to hear this prohibition. As you know, I want to echo the words of my previous panelist members that this is very ignorant of our government, given that the most of the impoverished communities have over the centuries been using this plant for medicinal purposes, for maintaining their livelihoods. And government has, in fact, invested in ensuring that their products are able to meet the local and international standards and also to meet the regulations. So to come overnight and just ban everything, to us is really anti-revolutionary, and it's also anti-poor, and it should be rejected. We have evidence on the ground that our people are trading and the trade are improving their lives. We have a high rate of unemployment. I think the last time I checked the statistics, we were nearly at 32% of unemployment. We don't even talk about the inequality. We don't even talk about the lack of development, even the ability to access health facilities in the Eastern Cape. So when we have opportunities then to solve some of these national problems by ourselves, then there's a government department that comes and scrap all that. They're not only undermining the efforts that have been done by the sister government, such as the Department of Small Businesses, the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, where they've put facilities in rural areas to ensure that communities are able to be close to industrial hubs where they're able to be assisted to ensure that their products go to the market. So to us, this is really not on, and it should be prohibited. It's in fact unconstitutional because it doesn't align with the constitutional values where that all people have the right to the trade of their choice. So now they're prohibiting trade without even the scientific evidence on the ground. We've done research with universities such as Sisulu University, Nelson Mandela University. The University of Free State has done extensive research on cannabis. Evidence is there on the ground that the good and the bad of cannabis. So if they want evidence that will support the regulation, we have that evidence. They must bring us on the table so that we can have constructive engagement, and they must allow the industry to self-regulate while they're not sure as the government where to take the country forward with this cannabis industrialization. But we support the view that cannabis should be fully industrialized in South Africa and be well regulated. Obviously, we don't want to see the same challenges we're experiencing with the alcohol industry, where the alcohol use is out of control, even minors are accessing alcohol and there's no control. We don't want to see that. We encourage a well-disciplined and well-regulated industry, but the regulations should not stifle trade. We have international partners that have come in Bondoland, to be specific. They say, you have the best cannabis and we want to partner with you in textile manufacturing, in medicinal use, even in foodstuff. So this regulation is really not assisting the country to move forward in terms of the economic development, even in terms of meeting and meeting the sustainable development goals. Because if you're looking even at climate change, cannabis is known scientifically to have contribution due to its ability of carbon sequestration. We want to reduce plastic on the planet. Cannabis is the solution, I think, as Mama Tam has already indicated. So we have scientific evidence that the government needs to inform proper and adequate regulation. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Doc. We really appreciate that insight on the ground. So we're going to just go to our last section now, just to get a few comments. I think it's really important to understand, as the Doc said, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, there's lots of box ticking that happens in that space in terms of hemp and its ability to do that. We've also got to look at internationals that are continually looking at this market, Recently, was a French delegation out brought out by Kobasa that wrote a full report on this country. Paul, who was on earlier, was out here. There are people really starting to look at our economy. Guys, I'm just going to go around and just get a quick takeout point, so just to finish off. What do you think of what's happened today, and what are the next steps? Let's start with you, Ricky.
Thanks, Trenton. I'll keep it short. Look, this probably sounds quite contrarian in the spirit of what has been said here. But, I often say we have to go backwards in many aspects of society before we can go forward. So, there's a lot of talk around the separation between hemp and cannabis as a plant. I don't believe that that is what we should be doing. And history will show us that, as I'll just illustrate briefly. But what we should be doing is regulating the different use cases of cannabis. So, if it's a foodstuff, such as a grain, it has its own regulations. If it's a fiber, then it's regulated according to textile requirements. If you're using cannabinoids in medicines or as adult use consumption, then it has a separate set of regulations. So, I say this, because truly, and this is not contrarian, this is not a novel approach. To the contrary, what has been adopted globally, at least over the last 50 years, is actually novel. Now, perhaps the starting point is really that, cannabis, the plant, has only been prohibited for a century, right? So it was about a month ago, 100 years ago. And we must be very clear that this was led by white people to prohibit sacred plants used by black people. Now, if you look at what the International Opium Convention listed this plant as, it called it Indian hemp. Now, to me, that is the sheer irony. 100 years ago, we were saying Indian hemp is the bad one. Now, some are today saying, no, dacha marijuana is the bad one. So, look, this really is a delusion of grandeur, to be honest. And I really believe the only way forward, a lot of this ignorance and confusion is only created in law, right? Hemp and cannabis are only separated in law. So to move forward, I believe the plant must be treated as a plant, an agricultural crop, and the different use cases within the various demand pathways need to be regulated appropriately. That doesn't mean that by adopting this position, we hold hemp back. To the contrary, the Plant Improvement Act should be amended to list cannabis as a crop. So if we really are serious here about using a plant, and we must be serious. What we are trying to do is reimagine a century of industrial value chains. This is a lot of hard work, but I would like to think that over the next century, we can really retire this plant apartheid and this prohibitionist mindset, because, and as my parting shot, this is one plant after all, rope or dope.
Thanks, Ricky. Really appreciate that closeout. Tebogo, your thoughts? Where do we go from here? What are we going to do to get this retracted? You just need to unmute yourself, Tebogo. Okay, I think let's get Tebogo off mute and let's go over to Tommy. Tommy, just some final words.
Can you guys hear me?
I know we can hear you. Yes, go for it.
Okay, sorry guys. I was saying thank you guys for putting this whole thing together. Really appreciate it. Linda, being in the background there, we see your magic. My feeling is that these guys are completely unreasonable. You have very, very powerful people sitting at very, very powerful institutions that are very, very ignorant. And I think this has to be highlighted out. They are ignorant and they're making laws that affect millions and millions of people. So in absence of anything else, apart from us making sure that we put an injunction order against this whole thing, we need to go personally against these people for personal orders against them themselves. Instead of using government money protecting themselves, we need to remove all of that and go personally at them. Personally, Minister of Health, personally, Anban Pillay, personally, anybody in that department, so that they can feel the heat that we all are feeling. They can feel the frustration we all are feeling. People are losing money on a daily basis because of stupid laws that are made by powerful people that don't have knowledge about what they're doing. So I think those are the parting shots I will be able to go away with this. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tebogo. I think there's definitely a degree of ignorance, but let's not forget that there's also a degree of manipulation here. You know, I mean, Anban Pillay on a webinar 3 years ago clearly stated that hemp, or actually cannabis, had no nutritional value at all. Now, somebody who's in the health department to make such a farcical statement, an educated statement, you can't blame them for being ignorant. There's obviously forces at play and things that are happening in the background to slow this down, and we mustn't ever forget that. Tami, quick word from you. What are you going to do with the people on the ground in Mpondo Land and the Eastern Cape to drive this narrative and get this thing rescinded?
Thank you, Trenton, once again. What we did when we saw this ban, we wrote as the Eastern Cape hemp producers to the office of the president. We even copied Rudy Dix on that one, because we felt that it needs his intervention, because there's been a contradiction also to his SONA statements that he made in the previous year, including this year. So, and we were saying, let the farmer be given an opportunity to farm. And it is the top part of that plant that is giving us more money than any other area of the plant. And we want to farm the whole plant. If there's a need for us to sell the roots, let us sell the roots. There must be nothing that is going to stop us to be farmers. So anything that we need, that we can do, is to make sure that this thing is unbanned, and also to make sure that the government is going to try and make sure that they are going to educate themselves thoroughly to understand what cannabis is. And I do concur with Ricky Stone when he says there shouldn't be any now differentiation. Each part has got to have its own regulations if needs be, but all the plants need to come and be available for us to consume, to wear, to build houses. Everything should be happening. And at that time, it will be affording the resource poor farmers to be able to emerge to be commercial farmers. So let us work hard. All of us who are going to join with everybody who's going to fight this and make sure that government is doing the right thing. Thank you, Trenton.
Thanks, Tami. You know, ignorance of the law is not defensible or in court, and ignorance of this plant is no longer acceptable to the cannabis and hemp industry. I think we've done enough of making excuses for people. So thanks for that, Tami. Ayanda, I know you've been lobbying and working tirelessly in the background for many, many years on this. This is a punch in the gut, you know, that I know that you and I personally felt. Where do we go from here? What's the next step?
Thank you very much, Trenton, and thank you very much to all the other speakers as well, who have made very valuable contributions. So I think first things first, we're not going to be as kind as perhaps some others are. We're not asking kindly for the minister to withdraw this. We are demanding this, and we are going to proceed litigation. Should they decide to not withdraw it or delay it, there are already damages. We can quantify them, and they've fortunately given us quite a lot of fodder for any other challenges that we will pursue. But this is absolutely absurd. And I think where we need intervention beyond the Department of Health is really at the highest levels here. The promises that have been made by the president, who is the head of state, need to be followed. There's also a lead minister here, a new lead minister for coordinating all of our cannabis and hemp industrialization and policy planning, and that's Minister Parks. These guys need to be held to account here, and if their officials are the ones who are recalcitrant, they have to be put into line. I think that just goes without saying. I think the second thing is related to what Ricky was talking about, the way, I think, or maybe just to say, a framework that we've introduced as FOSA, which we've borrowed from elsewhere as well, is to not think about the plant as one thing, but to have more of a sort of a segmented approach based on the application. So we often talk about farming, foods, feeds, fibers, fractions, and fuels, which allow you to actually see the usage of the various plant components for all sorts of downstream applications. And I think that's where we need to focus the efforts of our regulations. The third thing is we really do have a regulatory crisis at the moment. This is an example of what happens when you're trying to coordinate a sector across all these various bills. I mean, there is no consistency from the Department of Health, both from its agency, SAPRA, and itself through this ban. So if one department can't manage to sort of get this right, we're going to have a major challenge trying to get all of this together. We've spoken for a number of years now about the idea of a single bill that amalgamates all of these to lend a little bit more of coherence and to avoid these kinds of blunders. That seems to have come off of the table, and that's something I think we all need to be pushing for, recognizing that in the interim, we do require the regulations for the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act to be accelerated. It's been almost 10 months since the president assented to that act, and we have not gotten any regulations, which means that the act in effect is actually not operational, despite what the public might think. So we have a real major regulatory crisis. They need to make a real effort with getting us these interim regulations across a number of areas, and then make an effort across the single purpose bill. I do think that the master plan is no longer a useful vehicle. I think there's a discussion to be held here, and this is why we've been asking for 5 years. We need to be engaged now, not with junior officials in the department, but we need to have direct engagements with all of the relevant ministers across these various departments. They've not given us any airtime, with the exception of Togo Didiza at the Pakisa, who spoke at us for about 10 minutes before she left. There actually has not been any real prioritization from the public officials that we have elected to take over this. So those are some of the things that are important. I think final thing, Trenton, is really something that you guys at Chiba are doing, which is to really march a real effort around destigmatization, because I think that's really the issues that we have, the stigmas that are driven by irrationalities, that are driven by lack of education. And I think it's important for these platforms and all of us in industry to really think about how we improve that knowledge among our regulators and also among the general public, so we're not fighting this thing on our own. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amanda. Capped it off really nicely. I think we are in a legislative vacuum at the moment. There's a degree of apathy. There's a degree of forces that are trying to slow this down. There's a degree of lack of interest. Yes, we do need to educate people, but we've had a long time to do that. So the ignorance of this is just not acceptable anymore. I just want to thank all of our guests who came on today. This has been a really amazing webinar. We only put this out last Thursday and had over 900 people register for this, which clearly sent out a clear message to government that we are unified as an industry, not always, but we will not sit down and let this happen. We demand that this ban is rescinded immediately, and if not, we will resort to civil action. We will email, we will do more of these webinars and anything we do. At the end of the day, cannabis and hemp has a huge opportunity to feed our people, to drive our economy, and us as the people will no longer tolerate apathy and slow government impact on this. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time.